This is Adrian Green from the Boiler Room and the Standpoint University, linking up with GineOn magazine. We're about to talk to Lady NV. What going on? Lady NV, Natasha Bynoe. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm absolutely wonderful. How are you? I'm hot, but I'm wonderful.
Yeah, man. I mean, we had the spirit bond in tongue, and our spirits are going to bond because we're talking about a topic that is dear to my heart and dear to your heart. All right. So they know Lady NV, the internationally syndicated radio DJ. Then there is Natasha Bynoe, who is a genealogist, historian, anything else?
Researcher.
So tell us a little bit about the difference between Natasha Bynoe and Lady NV, the different things that they do and how they work together.
Okay, so this is Lady NV, very in your face, very your friend. So is Natasha too, but Natasha's more academic. But she's more of the one who's critically thinking, who always asks the questions. Lady NV is about fun, period. So how the two marry is that understanding demographics and understanding people. Sometimes you can't come across too, I don't want to say intellectual, but you can't come across too stiff. So Lady NV comes in with that fun element to try to reach the masses in various ages. What
does Natasha do? I'm more familiar with Lady NV. I know Lady NV plays the hits, formerly of Slam 101. You had a show that was heard around Africa. How many countries?
8 different countries. I think we were in Gambia, Ghana, Senegal, Zimbabwe, Botswana. But right now we're heard in Uganda and we're heard in Ghana.
So you used to be in 8 countries. You're now in 2, Uganda and Ghana. And you were telling me an interesting story about how that show that you used to do went away and what caused it to come back. Tell me that story, please.
So in 2015, right, when I left Slam, I got tired of the music. But before then, I had gotten tired of the messages the music was sending. I loved the beats, I loved the creativity, but it just became too much. It became too misogynist. It became too much about drugs, money, how much so-called power they have and how they're going to wield it. It was too much, in terms of hip-hop and dancehall. With the soca part, it was just too much of, how much you could walk up on a woman and drinking. For me, I needed more. So, yeah. So basically after that, I just decided to call it quits. I'm done because the show promoted Caribbean music, both dancehall, zouk, soca, hip-hop in Africa, yeah. They were very well versed about the different carnivals that was happening, I also, one of the great things I loved doing was exposing Caribbean artists to the African, audience. And it got to the point where African artists started to call me to link up with Allison Hines and various other artists here, so that marriage started to happen. But then, like I said, I got tired of that. And then when I went to Ghana in May this year, I realized, one, the show really had a major impact. I didn't realize how big the show really was in Ghana. And 2, I realized it was ours. It's our music, despite I may have some issues with it. Don't get me wrong, I'll still listen to it. But I just feel that but artists need to be a bit more creative when it comes to, and more versatile when it comes to making music. I would walk down the street like, "Hey, you're Lady NV." I'm like, "How you know?" Facebook. And sometimes, and same thing here, sometimes I'll open my mouth and talk like, that voice sounds very familiar, And then the really cool part really quickly was that I was at a party and I was talking and a lady from Zimbabwe actually was in town, and then she worked at the radio station I worked at in Zimbabwe. I said, "Miss Red," I said, "I'm Lady NV." She's like, "Oh my goodness." She's like, "Oh my." It was just really amazing to be able to link up with people from various parts of the world in Ghana,
You said when you went home to Ghana. Explain that.
Yeah, I felt at home. Prior to me going to Ghana, I was very nervous. Although I read in the books, in my gut I knew I would be fine. But the subliminal messages or the unconscious sometimes can creep up on you and play games on you. And I said, I have to get rid of the colonialistic thought. I have to just go with an open mind and open heart. And once I opened my heart and my mind up, it became home.
And what did you do in Ghana?
What did I do in Ghana? I did a lot. I spent 7 weeks in Ghana. And so the first thing I did, I flew to Accra. And then I met up with one of the directors at Cape Coast Castle. And we flew to Tamale. Whilst in Tamale, we went to the various slave camps and slave markets. slave wells as well. We interviewed chiefs and kings of various kingdoms and talked about the oral histories of the slave trade. We went up to Burkina Faso, as far as Burkina Faso, and it was very interesting. Then from there we went to Kumasi, understanding how the Ashanti played their role in the slave trade, which is something they don't really want to talk about as well, and seeing their kingdom and how powerful they really are. Going down to Cape Coast Castle, I spent 3 weeks working at Cape Coast Castle, or researching at Cape Coast Castle in Elmina. Then from there I went to Accra, which was pure party and fun. Yeah.
You were born in the U.S. to Barbadian parents, and you talk about going home to Africa. So these are three different identities. Some people might not understand how the three of them link. It's not only Lady NV and Natasha. Now it's Lady NV and Natasha, the Barbadian, Lady NV and Natasha, the American, Lady NV and Natasha, the African. For some people, you just sound all mixed up. You just confused. What's going on there?
Well, you know, I was born in New York. My culture is American. That is my culture. That's part of me. But also my parents are from Barbados. That's also part of my culture. But understanding that's not where we originated from. Understand that's not where we came from. I'm African first. African first, Barbadian second, American third. I have two businesses. One is called Urbanity Tours, where we focus more or less on the African side of history here in Barbados. Well, most people tend to focus on the colonialistic side. I also have a company called Ancestry Detective Agency, where we look up people's family trees and, you know.
Is this a popular thing? People do that? People go and look up their ancestors?
It can be at times. It has its trending moments. For now, it's kind of, for some reason, I don't know what's happening, but people seem to be moving away from it, you know. But at the same time, I guess it depends on who you meet, you know. I find a lot of African people, when I say African, I'm talking about African diaspora, they tend to not want to know, because I see when I talk about going back to slavery days, if their family tree will go back as far. Because sometimes you might be black in skin, but your great-grandparents might come from European descent. You get where I'm coming from. I see a level of shame and a level of sadness and hurt on their face, and it's just a history that they don't want to know. You know, opposed to, I find the European side, they're more eager, they're interested, and I guess part of it is also because I'm able to trace back their family members as far as 15, 12 generations back. But for us, I can only go but so far, unfortunately. Yeah.
So how far can we go? And if you were to sell it to someone, like, why is it even important for someone to know all of this? I mean, I'm here now. What difference does it make, you know, who my great-grandfather was or my great-great-grand, you know, people I didn't even know?
I can only talk about personally, but for me, it put my life in context. It gave my life even more purpose. So everything I do, I now walk with my ancestors, understanding at least a part of who they were and who they are. I say are because I believe they're always with me. So I was able to get back as far as 1750, enslaved person, because I don't believe they were slaves. Enslaved person called Margaret, who gave birth to Lucy in 1785, and then she gave birth to Harriet in 1820. They were all enslaved to the Beachy Head plantation in St. Philip. I was just there 2 days ago, actually. And understanding that Margaret was a field slave, and Lucy and Harriet were both house Negroes, you know. And then from there, Harriet gave birth to Mary Elizabeth. Mary Elizabeth was just a laborer. And then she gave birth to Angeline. Angeline was also a laborer, not too far from where Mary Elizabeth grew up. And then Angeline gave birth to Matilda, who was an entrepreneur, who was a cook, who was a chef. She was labeled a cook in her days, but looking back at it now, she was a chef at the St. Lawrence Hotel. And then she gave birth to my grandmother, Angela, to Margaret, then me. I've been able to achieve the highest level of education is to me a lot more important. It brings more meaning to me. They weren't afforded a basic education because they weren't able to write. When I see their records, there's an X next to it, meaning they couldn't read or write. You know, so all that means a lot to me, and understanding that generations in my family now will have to surpass me, you know, whether it's academically or whatever they may choose to do in life. So yes, it brings context to people's lives, and yes, it hurts, but that's the pain that we have to face. I'm
trying to go back to come forward. So you used to have, Lady NV has a show in 8 countries in Africa with a listenership of how many people?
It had a listenership of 8 to 10 million.
You had a radio show with a listenership of 8 to 10 million people per week promoting Caribbean music in Africa. But you got a little bit uncomfortable with the messages and the music.
No, I just didn't like the messages.
Just didn't like it?
No, it was more of an uncomfortable because I felt a responsibility, a certain level of responsibility. And I cringed every time. I dreaded sometimes sending the show.
So at some point in time, you decide, you know what, I need to walk away from this because I don't like what I'm promoting in Africa. Is it then that you started your career as a historian and genealogist?
No, I wanted to be a genealogist from as early as 2000. And I did that by finding a family member's father that she never knew who her father was. Then I said, you know what, I can do this for other people. And then I said, well, if I'm going to do this, let me learn much about history because history helps build the context to, people's everyday lives and situations. And that's how I became a historian. At the time, my career started when I was 15 years old. I started at WNWK in New York, and from there, but prior to that, I was working at Def Jam. I used to work for KRS-One. I was his assistant publicist, assistant manager at one point. And so my mother got me fired.
You can tell us that story or no?
Yeah, no, I can talk about that. Well, what happened was Chris had a Midwest tour, and I was 17 at the time. And he wanted me to, because my job was to help put it together. So he wanted me to go on the road with him. And my mom was like, no. And furthermore, she's 17 years old. My daughter ain't going nowhere, so you better find somebody else. Next day I went to the office, I was fired. But I went back to KRS-One about when I turned 18, which was like 2 months away. But it just wasn't the same. And I realized my love at that point was radio.
So at 17 years old, you're working for KRS-One, one of the pioneers of what we call conscious hip hop. So you ain't no start getting interested in Africa? No,
actually, I would say my consciousness started maybe in elementary school to junior high school. I remember in junior high school basically holding protests for more African-based type classes, and especially it really took hold in high school where I actually did hold many more protests for that too, because I was tired of hearing about European history. I was tired of hearing about American history. I knew I was black. I knew I came from Africa, so like, what about me, And then that even continued well into LIU when I was going to university. But even I dropped out of high school. I dropped out of high school because I even realized high school for me was school for me. The way they were teaching, the methods they were teaching weren't conducive to my way of learning. And I knew what I wanted, so I went for it. I decided, I just picked up the phone and I would call EMI Records and ask if you're hiring for an intern. They said yes. I said, okay, fine. And from there, my career started to build. And I started working for Def Jam. From Def Jam, I went to KRS-One. And then from KRS-One, I went into radio. So that's how my career progressed.
People hearing about your interest in Africa and your interest in conscious music and your level of awareness may look at you and see the weave and see the makeup, and for them it may not match up. Oh, do you get that?
I get that. And I always say it's within my right. This is my freedom. And for a minute there, when I went to Ghana, I was going natural for like 4 or 5 months. I made the conscious decision to do that. I want to get back to my roots. And to be quite frank, I loved my natural hair. Growing my natural hair made me realize that by perming my hair actually becomes dead. But by growing my natural hair, it was alive, it was vibrant, When I went to Africa, I saw ladies wearing the weaves, the braids, everything. And one thing I realized about the people in Ghana, they know who they are. They know what true freedom is, And then it was from there, I said, you know what, it's very well in my right to wear what I want to wear when I want to wear it. And I don't like certain groups or people telling me how I should look, if you get where I'm coming from. Not only that too, sometimes in order to get through to some people, you have to look like them. You get what I'm saying? In order to get the message home. And personally, sometimes I like it. It's a love-hate relationship. It's a love-hate relationship between my weave and even my natural hair is a love-hate relationship when I do decide to go natural. But yeah.
When I was in Ghana, it was a kind of bittersweet moment for me because I felt at home and that was good, but it was bad in that I was like, shit. They got some of the same issues over here in Ghana that we have back home in Barbados, in some cases worse, and that is in terms of materially, economically, but that is also in terms of consciousness, because I think sometimes we don't understand that colonialism happened in Africa too, and they may have been or were as messed up psychologically as we were.
but I also find that they have a greater sense of power and a greater sense of freedoms, understanding of freedom. So for example, they don't have that label of being called Afro-Barbadian. They don't have the labels of Afro-American, and they don't have to, not saying that we live up to it, but there's a certain responsibility, I guess, that comes with it. They're just human, period. And when I talk about power, they have an inherited power that we don't have. It was through studying about the various African kingdoms, I realized that, because I realized when I was in northern Ghana, people knew who they were. They knew what they were capable of. And I thought, well, maybe it was a community thing. Maybe because they're more community-based, everyone tends to support one another. So maybe, but no, it was through understanding that they came from histories of not wars, conquests, you know, defending themselves. They, as a people, know their own power. So with that said, it's an inherited power that we don't have, because we don't even know our own history. Many people only know about Mansa Musa, but there's so much more history that goes beyond Mansa Musa and Egyptology and Ethiopian. And can I talk about that for a hot second? I mean, as much as I love our Egyptian history and our history with Ethiopia and Nubia, I really wish a lot of other, not only historians, but people in general, will look at West Africa during those times and look at Central and Southern Africa and see what accomplishments they have done in their civilizations. I find we focus too much on Egyptology, and I think that's part of wanting to be part of the big picture. We want greatness. I'm not saying that we're not great people, but look at the greatness of West Africa and their contributions. You get what I'm saying? Same thing with Central Africa. I just wish people would do that. I'm sick and tired of it. I'll be honest with you. Because when I went to Ghana and I would meet Black Americans, everything was about Egypt. I'm like, but you are in Ghana right now. You're in West Africa. You're in a place that was called Lower Guinea. Why don't you learn about that first? Learn about the people who inhabited it. Learn about their civilizations. And to even go further on that, you know, I think the first week when I especially was up northern Ghana, my heart fell. Because growing up hearing that we were kings and queens, and we still are kings and queens, and we come from that background, I'm like, but these people ain't kings and queens, they live in huts. How am I part of this history? And then it dawned on me, Tasha, your history is much more, how can I say, much more stronger than that. Because what I was looking at just the surface level, not looking at the community base, not looking at the wealth that they have. And I'm not talking about the European system of wealth. I'm talking about the wealth, the rudimentary wealth of resources, cows, sheep, the land, the crops they have. That's wealth. And I keep telling people, I have met more Black millionaires in terms of European system of monetary wealth in Ghana, as well as resources. You get where I'm coming from? So I just wish people would open their eyes and really look at a people as they are and try to understand who they are and not judge because they may live in mud huts. That's just the surface level. Their communities are a lot more complex than that. You know, their histories are a lot more complex than that.
Many people may not understand that because, you know, based on the image of Africa that they have, you know, we have more maybe material prosperity in certain aspects over here, and you are seeing people, as you say, who are living in huts. How can they have a sense of power when they seem to have so little and we may seem to have so much? But it goes back to your idea of what power is and where power is located.
Yes, and not only power, but a sense of community, you know. And Barbadians do understand their power, but at the same time, it's a lot more powerful than they think. Put it this way, normally I would be scared to do certain things, but every time I do get a little nervous, I just draw on my African power, understanding, knowing where I came from. You know, I might not be able to pinpoint directly where my ancestry came from. But I think my spirit let me know sometimes, because there were certain places when I went in Ghana and Burkina Faso, I felt a connection to.
A lot of people will say, well, you ain't no African, you know, and them Africans don't even like we.
You do have some Africans who don't like us, you know, but that's, once again, ignorance. They don't understand, you know, they don't really, those are people who wouldn't, I guess, take the time out to really understand the significance of our history and the connection with them. I think that's also rooted in somewhat jealousy as well, that their perceived jealousy, that we have everything here, we have more opportunities here. But to me, in my view, I think Africa has way more potential and way more opportunities than we would have in the diaspora, totally. Like for me, and I wish my Barbadians would really understand this, there are so many opportunities here, it's not even funny. Here in Barbados, you just have to create it. Don't sit and wait on people. Don't sit and, you can look for a job, yes, but if you see something that needs facilitating, a particular sector or a particular need, service, find a way to make it happen. There's ways to start businesses without actually putting in any collateral. It just takes time. Like, for example, the whole DJ thing. When I first started DJing, like actually mixing the ones and twos and going on tour, I would, from the radio stations on the train, listen to every dance hall song, break it down in my head, listen to what they were saying, So when it came to me to actually mixing it, I know where the breakdown was. I knew what part of that was in the song, how I could scratch it in, how I could mix it in, because I wanted to be the best I possibly could do. You get where I'm coming from? And I just wish that we as a people would support one another more, because we can't do it alone. We have to support one another. And that's one thing I realized with the Ghanaians. They support each other.
Going to Elmina Castle and Cape Coast Castle, they call them castles, but dungeons. Was a very emotional experience for me. Was it for you?
In the beginning, no. I think I had the researcher's cap on, but I don't know. You see Elmina Castle? Oh my goodness. It was the female dungeons that every time I walked in there, I felt dizzy. Every time I did a tour in there, it gave me a headache. I felt nauseated. I felt lightheaded. But as soon as I left the female dungeon part, I felt fine. What I understand is that what my friends tell me is that the spirits are trying to give me a taste of what they've been through. But I didn't get that at Cape Coast Castle. And also part of me thinks that maybe one of my family members may have passed through there.
What was it like working with KRS-One?
Oh, it was awesome. It was interesting because you saw the artist side, and he has a spirit about him that he's protected. I can't explain it, but the man is phenomenal. He is. And then I also saw the Chris side. It could be miserable at times, But one thing about him, he loved what he does. And knowing his background, knowing that he was homeless, knowing that he would, had to sleep on benches in the park many nights, and to see where he is today, despite the controversy that he's entangled with right now, you cannot put aside his accomplishments, period.
What is next for Lady NV, and what is next for Natasha, and what is next for that combination, that dynamic duo of Lady NV and Natasha? And what I mean by that is, are you finding, or have you found, or do you plan to find a way to bring those two forces together?
Yeah, I plan to do a couple of documentary series on it. I have a lot of footage from when I documented everything in Ghana. But that will also bring the fun side of it, because you can't, history can't be always stiff. You have to be able to speak to people on various levels, and that's where Lady NV comes in. As for Lady NV, well, Pure Fire is the name of the new show. YFM has been my number one. Well, actually, Ghana was my starting point in terms of my syndicated radio show. It started with them, and YFM were one of the first radio stations to accept it. So Pure Fire is the new show. The old show used to be called Urban Vibes. For Natasha, more or less more research. I found Nanny Greggs in the research, in the books, yes.
Is that something new? Or in finding Nanny Greggs, is that something that other historians have failed to do?
I would say yes.
Tell us who Nanny Greggs is.
Okay. In my view, Nanny Greggs is the reasons why the 1816 rebellion started, because she was the one who put it out. Look, you need to fight for freedom, because the planters wasn't trying to give it to them. She was one of the chief organizers of the 1816 rebellion.
1816 rebellion, for most people, know it as the Buster Rebellion.
Yes, exactly. But for some reason, Nanny Greggs has been swept underneath the carpet. People don't know what happened to her. They assume that maybe she had died, or whatever the case may be. But once again, I think being a woman, unfortunately, our histories may not be as important as the men's. Right? That's just, for me, part of it. Another part of it is that to me, a lot of historians just don't look. They don't use critical thinking skills sometimes to try to figure out, okay, let me subtract this year and do this, or do some calculations to get what they're looking for. So I found her in the books. She died at the age of 60. After the rebellion, she was demoted. I don't want to say demoted, but she was now punished, is more the word. She was punished as a field slave, and so that she worked in the fields. And then after emancipation, she lived not too far away from where she worked, where she was enslaved, the plantation she was enslaved on.
And can you be certain that this Nanny Greggs is the Nanny Greggs, is Bus's Nanny Gregg?
I do believe it's her, because the ages match up. That was my link, is the ages. I can't remember how I was able to find her original age, but the ages definitely do match up, even to death. And after that, what you see are, after the Buster Rebellion, you find more Nanny Greggs popping up, but women are naming their children after her.
So why was she not executed like the others?
A lot of people were executed. A lot of people were, like I said, punished in various forms. For her, it was a situation where she was now working in the fields, which is, according to some historians, the most horrendous and heinous part of slavery. To me, slavery is in itself horrendous and heinous, whether you're a house Negro or a field Negro. But she was allowed to live, but her history was just pushed underneath the rug, and she died at the age of 60.
Well, that's a big deal.
You know where she's buried?
No, I don't know. Tell us.
St. Philip's Church. Yeah, St. Philip's Parish Church.
So you're saying Nanny Gregg was buried at St. Philip's Church. Have you been able to locate the gravesite?
No, I went to the church, and unfortunately the records dating back to, I think she died in 1850, 1860, around there. I'm not sure. I have the records at home. They didn't have the burial. They didn't have the burial plots for that particular time, so I don't know what part of the church she's been buried, but I know she's buried definitely at St. Philip's Parish Church.
That's a big deal for us as Barbadians and for you as a historian to make that find. I just want to thank you for talking to us here at GineOn magazine and telling us what's going on with Lady NV, what's going on with Natasha Bynoe, and what's going on with our history.
It's true. Can I just say something? I really implore people, you know, if you can, save up your money and go. Everyone have to go to Africa at some point. Whether it's Ghana, Ivory Coast, whether it's Liberia. We have Barbadians in Ghana. We have Barbadians dotted in different parts of West Africa. So I always implore people to learn much about it and try to go home.
You're beautiful because you endure the heat here in the Spirit Bond, pure fire in the Spirit Bond, pure fire. The radio show, which is in 2 countries right now, but I'm sure that's going to expand.
I know for sure YFM 107.9 in Ghana, you could definitely listen to online.
Pure fire here in the Spirit Bond, where it is hot for real. Thank you, Lady NV, Natasha Bynoe.
Thank you for talking to me, and thank you for having that interest, because trust me, there's many people who said they were interested but weren't. And this is, to me, our history is very important, and we need to get it out, because as a people, I want us to build more confidence within ourselves. I want us to tap into that power that they got. I want us to tap into that internal power so we can create financial wealth.